Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Lisa Savage from Solon, Maine. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Before we get started, today is April 20th as we tape this, and it's the anniversary of the April 20th, 1914 Ludlow coal mine strike in Ludlow, Colorado, that is famous as the Ludlow Massacre, that Woody Guthrie, the folk singer, made famous in a song where 20 people were killed, including 11 children, by the Colorado National Guard, who were called out to break the strike, and they just mowed people down in order to break the strike. So I want to remember that as we start today. Why don't we begin by having you tell us a bit about yourself?
I am a native Mainer. I was born in Bangor, Maine. I live in Solon now, and I'm a school teacher and a literacy coach in a very small school district in central Maine. My children are grown. I have a couple of grandchildren. My husband, Mark Roman, and I are very active in the peace and justice movement here in Maine and nationally. And of course, you and I, Bruce, worked for years on the Bring Our War Dollars Home campaign.
That's right.
So currently I have the Maine Natural Guard campaign underway, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later
And
on.
in fact, can you rise up and show your shirt a little bit? Yeah, there you go. Maine Natural Guard.
Maine Natural Guard.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's go back to your school. You live in a rural district. How is the funding and how's the school doing these days?
Funding is always short, always poor. There really is not much of a tax base. As you know, in the United States, public education is largely funded by local property taxes. So if you live in a community with high property values, your local schools are typically pretty good. The area that I live in has been economically depressed for years. One of the few mills in the area, which is in Madison, right across the Kennebec River from my school district, is closing. And there is very little job base there, so property values are low, and we are always facing cuts. The state of Maine has yet to fulfill its obligation to fund public education, even at the 55% level. And so we struggle along, making do as best we can with limited resources.
And so because the job situation there is bad, that must mean that the military is doing a lot of recruitment inside your school. I imagine that's the graduates there are hot commodities for the military these days. Indeed
they are. They have been. And military recruiting is very active in my area. And the most often cited reason that a student would give for joining the military is, of course, money for college. So as some people have pointed out, giving free college educations like most of the wealthy countries on the planet do would hurt military recruiting terribly, because that's the number one reason that students cite for going into the military.
So you think that's maybe one of the reasons for the strong objection we hear from the kind of corporate media against Bernie Sanders' call for free public education, that it might have something to do with that?
I think it might be. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, is also calling for not only free public education through college, but also forgiving all that student debt, because people have gone into vast amounts of debt that didn't join the military, and then the job market's poor, so they end up being indebted for life. I think that the military recruiting probably is a key factor in that, yes. We went to a volunteer military some years back and did the draft that was so unpopular during the Vietnam War, and you got to find some way to pressure people into signing up.
Yeah, the economic draft, we call it today.
Draft, indeed.
Well, you've created this new website called Maine Natural Guard, not National Guard, but Natural Guard, asking people to take a pledge. What do you mean by the Natural Guard, and what is this pledge that you're asking people to take?
Well, I think that there's a general agreement right now between you and I, certainly, and the community here in Maine, that the environmental crisis of our planet is probably the most concerning thing. Even those of us that are anti-war workers are seeing climate chaos really affecting lots of people worldwide. It will probably be affecting our food supply pretty seriously. But one of the things that I notice is that the big environmental groups, especially the ones that focus on carbon load in the atmosphere, fail to mention the huge elephant in the room. The Pentagon is the largest organizational polluter on the planet. It consumes the most fossil fuels. It has the biggest carbon footprint. Yet environmental organizations will hold a whole 2-day forum and never mention the word military or Pentagon. I think it's partly a result of the Kyoto protocols, where the U.S. managed to get the Pentagon carbon load not counted when reckoning up the U.S. government sort of carbon debt. But it seems to me that if we are talking about environmental protection and we're not talking about the military, then we're not really talking about the problem. So the pledge that I'm asking people to take is twofold, Bruce. And it is that in conversations about security and safety, which usually are the basis that people use to claim, but we need all this military spending, we need to be bombing civilians in Syria because ISIS, we need to go into, this, that, and the other country and have 900 bases worldwide for security. People need to ask, well, if the environment is careening out of control from carbon load, is that really security? Are we really talking about what would make us safer and our future generations of humans able to live on the planet? So that's part of it, is when you're talking about security, you have to factor in the environmental cost. I think Vandana Shiva was famous for saying, if it hurts the environment, it's not an investment. So that's part of it. And then the other part would be, when you're talking about environmental protection, the part of the pledge would be, bring up the military's role. Bring it up. Bring it into the conversation so people can recognize what the true dimensions of the problem are.
And so what is your solution to the climate change problem then?
We need to do a sharp U-turn on military spending, which takes up 54% of the discretionary budget of our taxes this year, and has been higher in past years. It's always more than half in the last decade. We need to take a sharp U-turn on that and stop spending money to burn fossil fuel to secure our access to fossil fuel in other parts of the planet. And we need to convert our industrial might, which was once pretty impressive. Now we mostly build weapon systems or tear gas canisters or things of that nature, and it's a lot of the reason why Mainers don't have jobs and people in Detroit don't have jobs. If we could convert that industrial might to making things that would help with the environmental problems, such as public transportation, like other wealthy countries have. In other countries, people do not have to get in their car to go everywhere. And we should be investing in education, K through graduate school, like other wealthy countries do, so that people are educated to be able to solve these problems and come up with solutions. We could be putting solar power, solar panels on every household, as you see in other countries. We could be providing truly universal health care. But basically, we need to invest our money in things that will improve security, safety, and the environment, not continue harming it.
Why isn't this a popular notion across the country, do you think?
Because information is controlled by the very corporations that profit from this situation. Most people in this country do not really have access to real information, even though they still have the internet at their fingertips. They could find real information. They kind of don't know how. They've been brought up all their lives with, they say the power of propaganda is not really that it tells you a wrong version or a wrong story. The power of propaganda is that it shows you about this much of reality and says that's all there is. All this out here doesn't exist. And most people have grown up in that type of media. We have the most fabulous entertainment media on, in the history of humankind. But news consists of ridiculous gossip about celebrities, and most of the students in my school have no idea which countries we're invading or bombing at the moment, and I don't think their parents or their grandparents do either.
So people know more about the Kardashian sisters than they do about what's going on in Washington, and that's not a coincidence that that's happening.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence at all.
Are you saying the American people are brainwashed?
Well, they're certainly kept in a state of ignorance, and they're even ignorant of their own ignorance. I'm not sure if that qualifies as brainwashing, but...
Well, as we tape this show, we've just had tax day in America. So talk a little bit more about where our federal tax dollars are spent these days and what it could be going towards. I mean, you've talked briefly about it, but go into
Yeah,
that a little more.
I like the National Priorities Project. It's a good website that analyzes the federal budget and crunches the numbers and then provides tools that are pretty user-friendly for someone to take a look at it. When I talk about the discretionary budget, I'm talking about the amount of money that Congress can spend each year, because some of the programs that our taxes go to are dedicated tax programs such as Social Security or Medicare. Those are payroll taxes that are, Congress can't spend those. They go to support those programs. 54% is even understating how much of the discretionary budget the military spent in the last complete fiscal year. I think that would be fiscal year 15, because all the nuclear research and development for weapons is under the Department of Energy. So that's kind of a hidden cost. And I think most people would assume that the Pentagon's budget includes the VA, the Veterans Administration. That is not the case. The VA has its own separate budget line, and I'm in no way suggesting that we shouldn't spend money to care for veterans that have needs after they've been in the military. I'm just talking about the Pentagon budget. It's essentially corporate welfare, because most of the Pentagon budget goes to contractors that make vast, vast profits off providing services that in past times the military would have done for themselves, such as meals and that sort of thing. And many people also wouldn't realize that the National Security Administration, the NSA, which is, spies on us all every second of the day, is also part of the Pentagon budget. So part of what you're paying for is to be surveilled at all times, too.
The Center for Defense Information, other military officers, has said that when you add up all these various pots of gold that are part of the national security budget, it actually comes to $1 trillion a year. And we see now local communities, like our own here in Bath, Maine, where I live, the communities become addicted to military spending. So how do we get out from behind that needle in the arm, if you will, of endless war? Because we really have to have continual war making in order to keep then the machine grinding along, don't we?
Well, we don't have to, but that's what people are told. On the one hand, they're told, fear the terrorists, you have to keep spending. And on the other hand, they're told, well, we can't stop building Zumwalt destroyers at Bath Iron Works. You'll throw all these people out of work. Economists know that actually military contracting is a poor way to generate jobs. When you invest $1 million in some kind of industrial production, military building weapon systems is the worst in terms of return of jobs. Simply giving taxpayers back a refund or a rebate would create more jobs. Investing in education, healthcare, or green energy systems would all generate more jobs. So it's another kind of false information that people are sold that, oh, well, we have to keep Bath Iron Works building for the Navy or we wouldn't have enough jobs. Well, actually, Bath Iron Works could build light rail systems that Maine doesn't have, commuter rail, and generate more jobs. And one of the other hidden parts, and this isn't federal taxes, but most of these communities give places like General Dynamics, which operates the Bath Iron Works shipyard now, huge tax breaks to even be there. So they don't even pay their fair share of taxes as a citizen in the community because jobs, and it's kind of a vicious cycle. I think that it has to be a combination of pressure from the outside of the people in the community and probably pressure from the inside of the workers at these industrial factories to say, we don't want to build weapons of mass destruction. We want to build something that will ensure a better life for our families.
Actually, we have one of those workers running one of the cameras today filming this show, Peter Woodruff.
Hey, Pete.
Recently retired after 33 years of work at Bath Iron Works. He's been a member of the peace movement for many years, even when he was working at BIW, and in fact was the first worker ever to speak at one of the christenings at Bath Iron Works, calling for the conversion of the shipyard. In fact, on June 18th, this coming June 18th, there'll be another christening I think it's a blasphemous use of a word.
Indeed.
But there'll be a christening of a Zumwalt on that day in Bath. And so we're going to be holding a protest, again, calling for the conversion of the shipyard to build these alternative energy systems. But the interesting thing is the Zumwalt is now costing well over $4 billion each. Now, the previous destroyers, the standard destroyers, were $1.5 billion. And the Zumwalt's $4 billion. So you want to talk about price escalation. It's just absolutely amazing.
Well, the Pentagon has never submitted to an audit, ever, even though those are our hard-earned tax dollars. You know, we're in a situation where my husband's a woodworker and I'm a public educator. We pay about we're charged about a 30% tax rate. We are war tax resistors, so we don't end up paying the 30% that they levy against us. While corporations that make huge profits off the taxpayers pay nothing. This is the kind of situation we're in. I know you could probably guess that I think a big piece of the problem is information. So I have a background in journalism and communications, and certainly I think that anyone with the kind of talent or skills, as we see here at our community television station, to share real information with people and get the word out. When we're at the protest at Bath Iron Works on June 18th, will the mainstream press be there? Maybe, sometimes.
Well, actually, I've been told by the Maine media that they're not allowed to come out to cover us. I've been told by
by who?
By BIW, that if they come out of the shipyard to cover the protest, they won't let them back in. And so they're essentially held hostage inside the shipyard. This is the media, supposedly free media in a free America. Right. We've got a military to keep us free, but BIW holds the media hostage, won't let them outside the gate. So let's change course for a minute, if we could, to another subject that I know you're concerned about. Talk about the racist hate language that's on the rise in this country and what this has to do with our current election cycle.
Well, again, Bruce, I think information control has been key here. We have the demagogue with the bad hair who has risen to prominence, basically calling out non-white people and saying it's their fault and we're going to build walls and it's immigrants that have brought us to this point and so forth. Those are not true, but he's tapping into a real fear that the working class, mostly white working class people have in this country, of feeling like, I'm not going to be able to care for my family. My children will be worse off than I was. Their children will be worse off. And it is a real fear economically that's where things are headed. To blame it on hardworking immigrants, most of us are descended from such hardworking immigrants at some point. It's a demagogue type of ploy to rise to power. But the reason that I say information control is, how many times has a demagogue been on the cover of Time magazine, Newsweek magazine, the front page of your newspaper, and so forth? They anointed this person the front runner in the GOP race months ago. And that's where most people get their information. So it's a rigged game.
Would you say it's used as a way to distract, like a shell game? To distract the people from the real issue, the corporate domination of everything? Yes,
but interestingly, I don't think that it's working very well. I feel that young people and working class people around where I live, with each passing year, more clearly understand that, corporations are our government, however much they might pretend that we have a democracy, and they're upset about it, but they don't know what to do about it. And they're very easily preyed upon by, again, lots of information showing people with brown skin and brown eyes and dark hair being suicide bombers, or many of them are defending their own homeland, much as any American would if there were invasion by foreign troops. But we keep ourselves in this state of fear of people that don't quite look like us. And, it's a political ploy to keep people focused on that. It's been done before in history. It doesn't end well. I was a history major. It's very scary to watch my country go down this path.
Do you think we're in big trouble?
I do. I think it's the rise of a kind of, sanctioned racism, and really fascism is government and business in cahoots. And
that was Mussolini the fascist dictator in Italy and during World War II. That was Mussolini's definition of fascism, the wedding of corporations and government.
And I think now we would have to add and information corporations, the media and so forth.
Yeah. One other thing related here, you live up near Skowhegan, where there's been a huge controversy about the high school mascot, the Indians. Can you tell us more about that local controversy?
Sure. It's a really interesting one to me because my father's family is from Skowhegan. My father went to that high school and was really into athletics, and I still have his varsity letter sweater. There's no Indian on it. It's a black sweater with an orange S and some stripes for years of varsity. The Indian was introduced as a mascot somewhere in the 50s. I think after my father graduated, he would be class of 51. The people there, it's a very similar kind of thing. The very lower income, never left town, don't have a lot of prospects outside of a very poor job market and kind of struggling economically to just hold on, much less prosper. Community has been vociferous in saying, this is our heritage to call ourselves Indian. This is our pride. And the 5 tribes of Native peoples that are in Maine have gone very respectfully to the school board and said, we find it offensive. It may have once been acceptable in polite society. It is no longer acceptable to have a mascot that appropriates our culture, uses an inaccurate term, and uses all kinds of things like cartoonish looking Native people, dressing up, and wearing, making the war whoop at games and so forth. So they've said it's offensive. There was a public hearing. More people from the public spoke in favor of retiring the mascot. There was a school board vote, very, very close vote. By 2 votes, they voted to keep it. But the tribal people, the Native people will not go away. They're not going to stop. They've now taken their case to the State Board of Education and the Maine Principals Association, which oversees athletics. There are athletes at my school. We do play Skowhegan sometimes, though we're in a lower division, that don't want to play where there's a racist mascot. There are Native students at my school that don't want to have to go to a school. But we're part of the VOC. You know how regional VOC schools will pull from area high schools? We're part of that. They're going to drive right past that sign of the Indian every time they go to school. So I think it's an issue that will resolve well here in a year or two. It's just taken some time.
We just have a couple minutes left, but one more thing I wanted to have you talk about. You're active in what's called the BDS movement that targets Israeli apartheid on Palestinian lands. You're a very busy activist, by the way. You got your hands in many different pots. Can you tell us what BDS is?
Stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. It's a form of economic pressure that was used to end, for instance, apartheid in South Africa. The Palestinian civic community has called on other activists to support them in this way. The United States gives a vast amount of tax money to Israel every year, and they use it to demolish homes in the occupied West Bank. They occupy parts of Palestine that were not given to them when the UN created the State of Israel. And it's a way of bringing attention to, for instance, the realtor Remax actually sells stolen homes in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. So it's a way of kind of asking people to use their pressure as consumers to let companies know we object to this practice and we would like you to stop doing it.
All right. I think, do we have a minute left here? 1 minute left. Do you want to make a short closing to the audience?
I would love to say that if people would like to join the Maine Natural Guard, they can Google my website, and there's the pledge is very short there to take. We are making more T-shirts if people want to order a T-shirt, and we would love you to bring these conversations to your local community and help people find some real information about what's going on.
All right, great. Lisa Savage, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.